Excellent, thank you. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today at the Gas Industry Award webinar organised by IGEM and the EUA. I'm Ben Clark, IGEM's president, and today we're going to be focusing on the Leadership Award, with many thanks to our category sponsor, Cadent. As revealed back in May, the winner of the Leadership Award 2021 is Danny O'Malley. Today will be an informal chat with Danny to discuss his career, influences, leadership style, and the projects he's recently been working on. I would encourage everyone to post any questions you have in the chat, and I'll look to incorporate those into our discussion as we go along. Before we get into the chat, just a quick word on housekeeping. The audience are all asked to switch off their videos and microphones throughout the event. If you do want me to pick up on any of your questions, then please use the chat function at the side of the screen, and a recording of the session will be made available afterwards. About the category. So the Leadership Award is awarded to the Chief Executive Officer or Director who's made a positive impact on their team, the culture of their organisation, business performance, and/or advancing the gas sector. The judges were looking for an individual with a proven ability to set and follow a clear direction for their organisation, demonstrable ability to build strong working relationships with a range of stakeholders, someone who leads by example and inspires others to strive for excellence and who can be relied upon to provide advice and guidance, someone who embraces new ideas, is open to change, and then considers new way of working, evidence that the individual's efforts have improved team and/or business performance. Now, Danny, could I ask you to join me on screen? Excellent, thank you, Danny.
Good afternoon, Ben.
Excellent, thank you, Danny. Danny O'Malley is the Group Head of Transmission at SGN. When nominated for the award, he was the Director of SGN Natural Gas. Danny brought over 30 years of managerial leadership experience in the UK gas industry to the role, advancing the gas sector in Northern Ireland. Danny is a former chair of the IGEM Scottish section and had the distinction of being the first SGN Natural Gas staff appointed to head up the new business. He galvanised a highly effective team and developed the business from the outset to deliver several successful milestones in 2019. Under his leadership, the main construction phase of the network, totalling 142 kilometres of pipeline, was successfully completed. This was the culmination of one of the largest energy infrastructure projects undertaken in the province for a generation. For the first 5 years of the project, Danny was the most senior company representative dealing with the strategic stakeholder, regulatory, political and media engagement, which has proved crucial to the project. In addition, he has negotiated with utility regulator for Northern Ireland on the most efficient approach for complex engineering challenges. Danny's passion helped ensure over 10,000 homes and businesses had a new pathway to an affordable, gradually decarbonised future, whilst also effectively addressing fuel poverty in the network area. Danny has a degree in mechanical engineering, is a fellow of the Institution of Gas Engineers and Managers, a fellow of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, and a member of the Institute of Directors. For the benefit of the audience, I should probably admit that Danny and I have known each other for well over 15 years, and so I'm really looking forward to this chat. Danny, many thanks for joining us today, and well done again on the Leadership Award. We're obviously going to speak about your work in Northern Ireland, but before we do so, and to kick things off, I'd like to go back to the start and have a quick chat about the start of your career. So, would you be able to open us up by telling us a little bit about how you came to join the gas industry and about your early experiences?
Thanks, Ben. I joined the gas industry in 1989. As you say, I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering, and similar to most graduates at the time, there had been a milk round where various companies came into the university and sold their wares. And one of the things that attracted me to what was then British Gas was the link to professional qualification. There was a structured training course that each graduate that joined the company had to undertake for 2 years. Now, this wasn't unique to British Gas at the time. There was other companies that I spoke to back in the time when I think jobs were a wee bit more plentiful than they are nowadays. But the thing that picked all the other companies that I was looking at was the diversity of the training that was offered by British Gas at the time. For those that remember, back in 1989, British Gas was still pretty much a monopoly, looking at everything from, I think the phrase was, drill bit to burner tip. And that there afforded you the opportunity to go across the whole of the UK and experienced many diverse areas of engineering, be it from the offshore side to the distribution side, transmission side. And that was the thing that attracted me. Also, as I say, the fact that they were positively structuring a training course that was accredited. I was already an associate member of the IMECI at that time, but I had in my head that I wanted to get chartered as soon as possible. And British Gas was the option that was given to me. So back then, I undertook the training scheme. As I say, visited all the various aspects of transmission for that first 2 years, transmission, distribution, including working in the SIUs and things like that, and seeing a bit about the NTS and the compressor stations, and it was a very fulfilling 2-year period. So that was where I started, and that then following being exposed to all these different opportunities across the company. My first opportunity came at working in central services, which was an area that looked after leakage control, pressure management for below 7 bar assets. Through time, we morphed with our transmission colleagues to look at all pressure control, storage and pipelines assets, and we moved into that area. And I've pretty much stayed in that discipline in various levels and various guises, looking at pressure control assets, storage assets, high pressure assets, contracts with third parties, things like that, all the way through until 2015, having got to the top of that department as the maintenance operations manager for Scotland, with responsibility for all those assets. The opportunity to come up to work in Northern Ireland as part of an exciting new venture with SGN, who had won the licence to take gas to the west. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to take on that role as a director, and that's how I ended up in Northern Ireland back in 2015.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Danny. So you described how that's given us a good overview of how you came to the Northern Ireland role. Could you tell us a little bit, just before we get into what you did in that role? I think some people will understand what the project was about, some people will not. Could you give us a bit of an overview of what the Gas to the West scheme was, and what the and what the overall project was targeting to achieve?
Northern Ireland is very different from Great Britain. It has its own utility regulator who regulates not just gas but also energy and water, a unified utility regulator in Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland itself is split. Up until 2015, had 2 distinct distribution licenses awarded to operate geographical patches within the country. There was the first one, which was awarded to Phoenix Natural Gas, which was in 1996 when gas was first taken across the North Channel from Scotland. And in essence, that started off being the Greater Belfast area, but it's since grown out. But Phoenix were the incumbent operator, and from a distribution perspective, since 1996. A second licence was then awarded back in, I think it was 2006, for the northern area of Northern Ireland. I think the licence was commonly known as the 10 Towns licence area, and that was won by a company called Firmus Energy. So they were the 2 distinct embedded distribution operators in Northern Ireland. That left a large swathe of the country, probably the biggest geographical part of the country, which was just known as the West. And that was through the counties of Fermanagh, Tyrone, and a small part of County Derry as well. So there was a few parts of the country that still at that point in time didn't have gas. An area that suffered from, if I'm honest, chronic underinvestment for a number of years. So there was a strong political lobby to bring energy to that part of the country, not just from a domestic perspective, but a lot of industry wanted to see natural gas come to that part of the country as well. So a competition was launched by the utility regulator to offer 2 licenses, one for a distribution operator and one for a transmission operator to build a transmission asset. Successful bidders were SGN, who were the winners to build the distribution licence area, which became ultimately SGN Natural Gas, and the other transmission licence was won by Mutual Energy, who were already an incumbent in Northern Ireland as well. There were 2 transmission operators in Northern Ireland already, with Mutual Energy operating the SNP and the Belfast transmission system, with Gas Networks Ireland also operating the northern part of the transmission system, which fed most of the Firmus network. So again, it was a competition where two companies had to work in tandem. There was a number of key stakeholders that we had to keep engaged, because the whole point of taking gas to the west, in the first instance primarily, was to support large industrial loads, notably down in Derrylin and in Dungannon and in Strabane. So we had to work closely with these downstream stakeholders as a collective between ourselves and SGN Natural Gas and with Mutual Energy. I should say Mutual Energy, although they were the transmission operator, they worked as a partnership with SGN Commercial Services to build the high pressure network that was to be installed. So a number of high pressure assets and 78 kilometres of transmission pipeline had to be constructed, and 142 kilometres of IP network that would then connect to the high pressure network also had to be constructed by SGN Natural Gas. So that was my focus, was the SGN Natural Gas element of that, but we had to, as I say, work very, very closely with our colleagues in SGN Commercial Services and with Mutual Energy, so that there was an integrated completion and integrated plan for delivery of everything, because ultimately when you build these assets, they all have to be commissioned in tandem. So again, it's about managing the delicate process of, will the upstream gas be available to go into our network that will then be available for downstream customers to begin the process of conversion. So a lot of that, we can perhaps talk about that later, but that was the kind of thread as to how the project came about. Subject to public competition, as I say, but subject to major planning restrictions as well. So once we overcame them, we really got cracking in 2017 through to 2019, when the vast majority of the assets were commissioned.
Excellent. Thank you, Danny. Well, back at the start of this call, I described some of the criteria that the judges were looking to assess the award against, and one of the criteria was that was a proven ability to set and follow a clear direction for their organisation. Now, what you've just described there is an absolute is a very large machine. And requires, with a lot of different moving parts, and you already started to touch on some of the complexities and interfaces with other clear stakeholders. When you came into that role, what was your first steps in terms of trying to set out what you were trying to achieve and to start to drive everybody in the same direction?
It was, as you say, it was multifaceted. One of the things you said at the start was that I was the first employee. There was a number of tasks that were put upon me to complete. First of all, build a company. SGN Natural Gas, as I say, with one employee wasn't going to go very far. So we had to begin the process of recruiting the appropriate staff that could lead and drive the business forward. So that was my first task, to be honest with you, was to try and go and get the best staff that would make SGN sustainable into the future. I have to be honest about it. The first place that I looked at was the gas industry in Northern Ireland, because that's where the expertise lay. And I was very, very fortunate to quickly set up a team that were able to, first of all, begin the process of creating a senior management group around me, but also to start to recruit team managers who could very, very quickly, whilst the company was being built, they could get on with building the network. So there was that strand that we had to focus on, was getting the SGN business set up. The second thing that we had to do was, as I say, the key thing, there were key deadlines that we had to try and meet, so we had to get cracking on building the network. So once we'd appointed the appropriate engineers and the appropriate managers to work with it, we had to then appoint a tried and tested contractor that we knew we could trust in Northern Ireland, and that's where we called upon, back in the day, it was a company called McNicholas. They were the incumbent contractor in Northern Ireland, having had long established relationships with Firmus and Phoenix. They won the competitive tender to build the first part of the IP contract from Derry down to Strabane, and that was probably a good stroke of luck in our part of the day, but they won the contract because they proved to be an excellent partner and still are an excellent partner to SGN Natural Gas. SGN Natural Gas, by definition, is a very thin organisation. It's a small organisation with tight staff. There's no direct labour. It's a 100% contractor model. But what Nicholas brought to the party was not just the ability to deliver the asset construction element of it, but the stakeholder management as well. They understood the key people to be talking to in order to smooth out any issues with perhaps roads or Department of Infrastructure, things like that. And that was, again, as I say, probably one of the key things that helped us go on and deliver the contract in the way that we did. And once that process started, it was then about gradually growing the business. Clearly, the starting point was to start building the pipes, but there was no point in building pipes until we had, unless we had customers at the end of it. Mm-hmm. And again, that's where one of the differences with SGN Natural Gas and mainland GB is different as well, because in Northern Ireland, the incentive to drive customer connections lies solely with the distribution companies. It's up to them to do the marketing. It's up to them to go and grab the customers. It's up to them to bring the headcount in and make the network expand and make the network grow. Not something within SGN we were used to having a marketing department to go out and sell gas, nor any other DN and GB. But again, we had to go and find the right appropriate people for that. So again, that was the next phase, was recruiting a sales and marketing team. And also we had to recruit heads of regulation and heads of finance as well. So over a gradual period, I recruited 4 senior managers around about me, and that became the core management team with myself that drove the business forward in terms of growing it as an entity, but also growing it as with its reputation, growing it in terms of its stakeholder management, growing it in terms of its engagement with regulators. Clear targets were given to everybody in terms of workload delivery, output, costs, most importantly. And over time, once these people got to know the SGN way of working, which again was a challenge for them, we got there. But it's been a learning experience from all of our perspectives, I would say, from day one. And I'm sure the team in Northern Ireland would agree that they're probably still learning as the business continues to grow and flourish.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Danny. You touched on a couple of things there that I'd like to expand on, which I think are really good, about building one team around you. And I think one of the things that certainly personally has always fascinated me is team culture. How do you go around building a team culture? What values do you set, and how do you sort of get everybody living those same values and bought into the same approach? Would you be able to talk to us a little bit about anything like that in terms of what you set yourself as a team and how you went about that?
The aim from the outset, Ben, was quite clear. I set the team the standard that we want to be the #1 gas distribution company in Northern Ireland. That was not that we were the newest, but I wanted us to be the best. And to be fair, I didn't have any pushback on that at all, because that was the aspiration of the people that joined the company as well. There's a great liberation when you join a brand new company. You're not getting brought in and you're actually given the license to set some of the rules and set some of the criteria that you're going to work to. Whilst we were part of the bigger SGN organisation, we had the autonomy because of the separate regulatory framework that we worked in, because we were actually legally required to, under business separation, to distance ourselves quite significantly from the main SGN business and do things differently. So we had the autonomy to design a business that was our business, that was our baby, that would sustain itself long after we'd left the stage. And that came through both in terms of, as I say, the core managers that I recruited. They brought some of their expertise and some of their knowledge from Phoenix, for example. David Butler, my head of engineering, came from Phoenix. Darren Young came from Firmus. Mary O'Kane came from the utility regulator. Chris Shine had various industrial experience across Northern Ireland. And all these fresh ideas came into the melting pot, and it was exciting to be part of it, because there were no barriers, no boundaries. Subject to, well, there were some barriers, but I mean, they were mature enough to understand where they could push things and where they couldn't push things. And even having things like the regulatory side with people that, as I said, were head of regulation, Mary, who came from the utility regulator, we had an idea of how far we could push boundaries before it would start to raise eyebrows, and in terms of, would that strictly be within the terms of what our price control allowed us to do. And that culture permeated down again through not just the team managers, but the sales reps that we recruited. Everybody wanted to be there. They jumped across from existing jobs in which they were comfortable. I don't think I've recruited anybody who was unemployed. Everybody came from secure jobs, but were excited and invigorated and wanted to be part of that culture. So that half the battle had already been done, to be honest with you, because people were just up for the challenge, up to be the best, up to tell the whole of Northern Ireland their story and what we were going to bring. And as I say, it was very refreshing and very invigorating to be part of that team and head it off.
Excellent. One key aspect of all works in the utility industry and particularly anything involving construction is safety. Now, we had a question in from one of our attendees today, Chris, who wanted to ask around about, and particularly with regards to the construction, did you appoint any safety representatives, and how did you as a top team engage in safety tours and setting the right culture with all that construction?
One of the first jobs that we appointed was a SHE manager for Northern Ireland. He was, again, trying to maintain independence. He reported directly to the SHE organisation within GB, within SGN. And that, to my mind, is good because it provides independence. But he was based in Northern Ireland, Dominic Scullion. Again, it came from the gas industry, so knew some of the traits that we had to be mindful of and wary of. We again, as I say, had a very, very positive SHE culture with McNicholas anyway, but we set up regular monthly meetings with them where we go out and do safety visits. It's fair to say that as you go around Northern Ireland, I went around Northern Ireland at the start of my appointment, and particularly into the west. It's fair to say that there are some fairly questionable working practices. Not, I would hasten to add, within the gas industry, but there are other contracting organisations whose approach to perhaps new roads and streetworks, cones and barriers, safety, reinstatement, all these kind of things, showed me that there was going to have to be maybe a bit of a cultural challenge here the further west we took the organisation, because it was clear to me that the standards that we would expect to see are perhaps not as embedded as they would have been in all other civil engineering operators in Northern Ireland. So from a safety perspective, I was very, very wary of that risk. And therefore, we had to have tight management as well of our subcontractors who worked under the control of McNicholas. And ultimately then, when we further awarded further contracts to Murphy GMC, another one of our partners, who then constructed the bulk of the intermediate pressure system. So there was regular safety meetings, regular updates. I'm pleased to say there were no real serious injuries over the course of the whole construction phase. But it's about people buying into the safety message. We were lucky that, as I say, McNicholas had that culture. MGMC also had that culture. Murphy's are a well-established company, as you know, all across the world, and safety again is pretty much embedded in the way they operate. But it's fair to say that if we didn't have the right partners, then that may have been a bit more of a challenge over the course of the project. But thankfully, everything worked out well.
Excellent, thank you, Danny. And just for the benefit of our audience, I would remind you that if you want to ask any questions of Danny, please use the chat function at the side of the screen, and I'll hopefully look to pick them up as we continue. Coming back to you mentioned about it being a new team, about the sort of liberation of new ideas and the like as people came together into this new organisation. How did you have any systems or practices to try and gather these new ideas and to try and help bring them to the forefront and perhaps celebrate success if they worked?
SGN had its own Ignite scheme, which allowed you to bring in ideas and get rewarded. That's like, I mean, there's been various guises of innovation schemes. I'm sure every company has their own scheme. So SGN itself already had that, but it was more about personal reward and personal acknowledgement, and the social side of it as well. I think you can never underestimate when you're under the cost and you've all got deadlines to meet, that you have to try and build relationships away from the office as well. So again, there was a lot of social groups set up. There was walking groups set up. There was nights out set up. There was quiz nights done. All these kind of things to try and build that team ethic and celebrate success. Within each of the different disciplines within the organisation, they look to bring in their own ideas, and they would then come to the SMT, where we would have a veto on whether things would not work or whether the things should be encouraged to go forward. We had that autonomy, and to be honest with you, that was probably it was a loose way of doing it. It wasn't a formalised way of encouraging it purely from an SGN Natural Gas perspective. We were more just focused on trying to flush out ideas. Commonly, as I say, the heads of the departments would have brainstorming sessions just to say, look, how do we need to get to this piece, be be it a new IT system, be it an obstacle in the construction phase that we had to overcome, be it a regulatory issue we had to deal with. It was just about, you know, people working together and not being afraid to ask the daft questions. And I think, again, when people are in new organisations for the first time, again, they're more liberated, that they don't feel bound and maybe a bit cowed to not have the confidence to ask these questions. And through that culture, I think that was how we, again, as I say, we managed to flourish and grow the company and grow the business.
Excellent, thank you. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about performance. I mean, obviously, you've already touched on the fact that it was an incredibly challenging budget that was set for the work in terms of the regulatory, you know, the price control, and obviously a demanding construction program as well, especially when you've got a new organisation and so many different stakeholders involved. How did you go about setting up the right monitoring, and what was key to you and your team as you were as the project continued? And I suppose perhaps most interestingly, is there any examples of where something wasn't going right and you had to make a change? And if so, what did you do?
The things that you're monitored on in Northern Ireland are fairly straightforward and probably understandable to a lot of people on the call. Your costs are pretty much tied down in terms of the CapEx allowances that you get. And the OPEX costs that you spend on the business, again, are heavily regulated. So these are areas where we knew we were going to be tightly managed by, and they were managed in the same way that every other business managed these things. It was monthly reviews. It was looking at where are we against budget. That would be reviewed right up as far up as chief exec level within SGN. So I had to do chief exec reviews on my finance against these delivery targets. And obviously we would have our own internal ones as that as well. The other things that you're measured on a bit differently are things like how many properties that you pass with your network. You have to declare that to the utility regulator as you go. How many connections you make in a year, and also what volumes you pass through your network as well. So you have to be showing to be both connecting the customers efficiently, but also doing the ones that are going to deliver the volumes that you said you would deliver at the start of the price control. So these are ones that you have to have a clear idea when you're forecasting internally and externally if you're going to hit these targets. Now, there were things that didn't perhaps go to plan, as things always do in projects of this nature. It was a £250 million project after all, and we were only one link in the chain. We had to, as I say, we had to do our bit, but we were very much reliant on the upstream gas being available to us and the downstream customers being ready. So these were things that we had to regularly review, regularly change, regularly manage. And that was probably the biggest element of it. It seemed to be, at certain stages, a constantly moving feast. The first stage of the construction project that we did was taking gas from Derry down to Strabane, to one of the main dairies in Northern Ireland. And even that, and when I look back at it now, you would say that was probably quite seamless, but that in itself was subject to moving delays, moving commissioning dates. But it's about building relationships with the stakeholders so that they understand from the outset that we're committing to getting to you by a certain time, but explaining to them the complexity of the job that we've got, the role that we've got to play, and managing their expectations. And I'm glad to say that across the piece, not just for the first customer, but for every major customer that we had, through engagement from a very early point in the project, and building one-to-one relations and keeping them updated and being open and honest with them as to where we were with the project, those difficulties that we had, we managed to overcome them.
Thank you, Danny. And what would you say has been perhaps, I'm going to move on to some questions about some other topics in a second, but before we move on, what would you say has perhaps been the biggest satisfaction from the whole project, the whole scheme?
Probably when we got the final town commissioned, we had to bring gas to every single town on the line. So we had 8 towns that we had to get gas to, and we wanted to get that done by 2019, and we were able to do that. And also the fact that we connected the customers, what we called them was anchor loads. These were the loads that, if you like, underpinned the whole feasibility of the project. You can't go and build £250 million worth of gas assets on the back of a potential to connect 40,000 domestic customers, because that's ultimately what the maximum expectation is for domestic customers over the course of a license period. But what we have, as I said at the start, is a significant demand from industry in the west of Northern Ireland. We have a huge glassworks at the end of the line, which sustains the network right the way down to the border. And we have a number of industrial processing plants and dairies as well that underpin it. And every one of those customers, to a man and woman, when we commissioned them, did it in line with their expectations, did it with minimum inconvenience to their processes, because they had significant change-outs they had to do, obviously, to their plant equipment. And we had no real kickback. And the warmth also that we got from the people who were bringing gas to the towns, it was very refreshing to go and meet the stakeholders within the MLAs, the councillors, who gave us the feedback to say, look, you're more than welcome, we're desperate to see you. A lot of times when utilities come down the streets, it's the last thing you want to see is the disruption that comes. But again, we had a very, very positive take on from the whole community across our licence area, because it's something they wanted to bring them in terms of addressing the challenges they had with rising energy costs in the current climate. So a number of rewarding parts on it, but just the fact that, as I say, everybody at the end up had a smile on their face when we were finished, and we had no real setbacks that we couldn't overcome in the project.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a couple of other related topics actually just now, if that's okay. And just a reminder to the audience that if you have any questions for Danny, please do put them into the chat function and I will pick them up, I promise. Excellent. So when I was introducing you earlier, Danny, we highlighted about your sort of professional registration and some of your memberships, and you're a member of a number of different organisations. And as I mentioned at the start, we've known each other quite a while and served together in the IGM Scottish Section Committee.
Yeah.
Many of our leaders are similarly professionally registered. And from your perspective, how do you feel that professional registration has supported you as an individual? Has it made it, is there any area that it's made a particular difference? But not only as an individual, what do you think it can sometimes bring to a wider workforce?
I'm fairly strongly of the view, Ben, that it's something that every company should encourage as much professional registration of their staff as possible. I've been a member of a professional body since I was 17 years of age. That's when I joined IMechE. And I did so at the time. First of all, when you went to university, you were encouraged to do it because it would give you access to information, access to people, access to thoughts that perhaps you hadn't explored in the way of doing things from an engineering perspective. And I did that all through my degree. And then when I joined British Gas, I did the same with IGEM. Again, I would say that IGEM itself gave me access to a further professional qualification that I am absolutely confident without which I'm a chartered engineer status as well, and I don't believe I'd be sitting where I am today if I wasn't a chartered engineer. It used to be pretty much mandatory to get any senior positions of an engineering persuasion that you had to be chartered, and a lot of companies across GB that perhaps is not as strong as it used to be. But it's still mentioned in every job advert when you get to certainly my level in the organisation. It's a preferred thing for people to actually have or work towards. Now, I think there's a couple of benefits from that. I think it helps you as an individual. I think it gives you confidence. I think it gives you gravitas. I think it gives you status, not only when you're talking to people within your own organisation or your peers, but also maybe when you're talking to adversaries, be them commercial adversaries, be the regulatory adversaries, be the any other people who might not share the view that you may have, because it demonstrates to them that they're not dealing with someone who's just in off the street. It demonstrates to them that someone who's professionally trained, has experience, has knowledge of what they're talking about, and therefore has confidence in what they're telling you. it's a trait that I think business can use to their advantage as well. I certainly know that when we've been bidding for contracts over the course of my career, the fact that I was a chartered engineer was front and centre of a lot of the bidding documents when I was named as a lead engineer on these kind of contracts, because it gives potential clients confidence that they're buying in not just a name, but a name that can be trusted, a name that can be called upon for advice or for guidance, or for wise counsel when it comes to engineering matters. So it's something I'm strongly passionate about. I'm thankful to say that in Northern Ireland as well, that culture was already there. The head of engineering that I appointed, David Butler, was already the section chairman of the Irish section, and again that culture with his own team has permeated through, and a lot of his people now regularly attend section meetings as well. But it's something I wish more people were still joining institutions like ourselves. I think it's incumbent upon all professionally qualified engineers to encourage their staff, to encourage their peers, to encourage their friends and colleagues of the benefits that they can get being part of an international institution, and more so nowadays when traditional ways of gas engineering are perhaps now being looked at under a fresh light, with the new technologies that we're using, the new innovations, tooling that we're using, and perhaps most importantly, where the future of energy itself is in question, and some great change is about to perhaps come to the gas industry. Now's the time, I think, more than ever, that people need to be aware of what the changes are and get themselves connected and get themselves onto that train, because I think it's going to be a bit of a roller coaster over the next few years.
Excellent answer, Danny. Thank you very much. Well, let's talk about you've recently moved to a new role. Can you tell us a little bit about the role you've gone into and some of your plans and objectives around about that going forward?
Yes, like probably a lot of distribution companies over the last couple of years, SGN has been preparing for the new price control, which started GD2. And as part of that process, the business took the decision that they wanted to try and realign all similar maintenance, transmission, major project construction activities under the one umbrella. A number of reasons for that. We wanted to have a centre of excellence, if you like, for that high pressure engineering. We wanted to pool the resources that were in a lot of ways common across some of these processes, because in the past there's been a lot of fertilisation across each process, where people from maintenance have moved into major projects and vice versa. So to that end, they decided that they wanted to create one unified transmission department within SGN. And I was asked to come back from Northern Ireland and head up that department. An opportunity again I couldn't refuse. It's a business probably now with £100 million business every year. It encompasses major projects, construction for Scotland and southern areas of SGN. Also the operational maintenance areas in both patches as well, looking after all pressure control, storage, high pressure pipeline assets. And also a new department which we've called Remote Networks, which encompasses our SIUs, their Scottish Independent Undertakings, which are supplied by LPG and LNG facilities, and also the contracts that we have with third parties. We have important third party contracts with Gas Networks Ireland. So we wanted to get everybody together under a unified team to pool resources, to pool, if I'm honest with you, financial efficiencies as well. A lot of the worked outputs that each of these departments are asked to deliver in GD2 are very codependent on cooperation amongst these teams. And with them having, up until last October, having different reporting lines within SGN, it seemed obvious to the business, and rightly so, that they would try and remove these potential blockers, look at where we can improve, look at where we can streamline, look at where we can gain efficiencies. So that's where I am just now. The process has really only been complete since the 1st of April, when Southern Maintenance finally came across into the new department, the new transmission department. And that's where we're moving. Clearly, COVID has been a difficult time for all of us, because that process has been hugely impacted by that. But we've had a good start, a good steady start to GD2, but I'm excited to again see what we can try and push forward now as the perhaps restrictions start to lift, and we can start to now get in a bit more meaningful dialogue and meaningful collaboration and corroboration as we work to hit some very, very challenging GDT outputs.
Excellent. And I would have thought a significant opportunity to apply some of the learning from the last few years, and in terms of the similar idea of bringing different parts together into one whole team. I would have thought. Is that a fair observation?
Absolutely right, Ben. Yeah. I mean, we've been having team meetings, and that's one of the clear steers I've given to every head of that works with me. Is look, there are no things that cannot be said in this forum. The old word silo is often used when you talk about industries that are of our scale. I don't believe there's silos, but there are established ways of doing things in each department, which is only human nature. There must be a right way of doing it. There must be a wrong way of doing it. We don't know where they are right now, but ultimately the aim over the next couple of years, and the sooner the better, is that we find where that best practice is, and we educate and we share and we nurture new ideas. And I'm already seeing the benefits of that, and I'm sure there'll be more to come in the coming years.
Absolutely, thank you. Well, just to I've not had any more questions in from the audience. So what I'd like to do is my final question for you today, Danny, is and maybe you touched on some elements of this earlier, but I would like to just ask with you described how you came into the industry in 1989, and you must have seen, just thinking about the level of change you've seen during your own time in the gas industry, and with some of the anticipated changes, coming up particularly over the next decade. I would say that IGM, the EUA, and Cadent, our sponsors, are all incredibly keen to see more young people coming into the industry, and I was wondering what, from your personal and professional perspective, what would be your key advice to any young engineer entering the industry today?
Good question. I would say that as a new engineer and coming into the business now, what you should do is try and involve yourself as much as you can in things that are outside your comfort zone. Whether there's projects that have been set up, put yourself forward and learn about the new technologies, learn about the new processes. I put myself forward through my career and volunteering to lead on things like ISO 9000 when that was getting brought into what was then DBM. I put myself forward to volunteer to lead on RCM, Reliability Centred Maintenance for Scotland Maintenance. Various safety initiatives that we undertook, I put myself forward for that. And there's a huge range of benefits you get from doing that. You learn yourself and how to what the new thinking is. You give yourself an opportunity to talk to others and develop your communication skills, which is vital. I think if you want to have a progressive career in any industry, not just the gas industry, I think you have to learn to be a good communicator. I think you have to learn to be a good written communicator, a good oral communicator, and able to talk as well as down to people who you're managing. Also be able to manage stakeholders upwards as well. Also, nowadays more and more you have to talk to people outside their company, people outside contractors, people, customers, things that were perhaps not the focus when I was a boy. I think also it gives people a chance to get themselves, if I'm absolutely candid about it, it gives them a chance to get themselves noticed and sell their wares. And the more positive impressions you can create of yourself as you grow through your career, the quicker you'll get mentors that will want to work with you, the quicker you'll get people who speak for you and vouch for you. And the more you do, and the more you do a good job, the more people will say if something special needs done or something needs promoted, I've got a good idea of the person that will fit that bill. So I would say get yourself out there, get yourself noticed, volunteer, involve yourself in the industry, involve yourself in the institutions, get yourself qualified. Again, these attributes will open doors for you. I'm absolutely certain of that as we go forward. And as I say, with the ever-changing nature now of the energy industry, I think there's going to be lots and lots of opportunities with people with experience, particularly in our industry, that we can take to the party as things begin to evolve and change over the next 10 years.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Danny. I think that's us come to the end. So I'd just like to say, to wrap up by saying massive thanks again to Danny for joining us today and giving so much of his time and sharing his experience. I hope everyone enjoyed our chat. Many thanks also to Cadent for sponsoring this award and event. Final thanks must also go to IGEM and the EUA for the teams for promotion and delivery of today's webinar, and to all of you for joining us. Keep an eye out for the recording, but many thanks again and hope to see you all again soon. Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you.